Everybody. My name's Aditya Ravi. I'm a computer science and math major, and I've been in Nexecon since fall of 2018. I'm currently serving as the Vice President of Finance.
Hey guys, I'm Shankar. I'm a math and business major. I joined Nexecon the same semester as Ravi in fall of 2018, and I'm currently VP of Recruitment and Education.
In this video, we're going to be running through a sample case interview to give you a better sense of what a Nexecon interview is like, and also go through some feedback at the end so you can understand what the evaluation process looks like as well. The structure of the case that we're going to be running through is going to be similar, but not exactly the same as your NCG first round experience. This video is really only meant for you to get a better understanding of what an interview process is like and should not be used as a template on how to prepare. It should really only be used as a rough guideline. We're really most interested in learning about how you approach these problems and go about them.
Definitely. And also just keep in mind that although the case interview seems like a really large component of our evaluation process, it's just one part. And we also really want to get to know you as a person through the events that we host and also during our interviews.
Great. Sounds good. Are you ready to start?
Yep, I'm good. Let's dive in.
Alrighty. Nexapaper has realized our profits have been negative for the past year. Management has looked into this issue, but hasn't been able to pinpoint the root cause, so they've called you to look into the situation.
Gotcha. Yeah, that seems like an interesting problem. So what I'm hearing is the client is Nexapaper, their profits have been negative for the past year, and that's kind of the main key question that we're looking into. Is it okay if I just ask a couple clarifying questions here so I can learn a little bit more about the client?
Of course.
Awesome. Well, I can guess that Nexapaper is a paper company, but I think would also be helpful to know maybe what types of paper they sell and who their customers are specifically.
Yeah, sounds good. So you're right in that Nexapaper is a paper company, and specifically Nexapaper produces a variety of different printer paper products, including but not limited to standard letter, which is the 8.5 by 11, tabloid size, and poster size, which are bigger sizes of paper. And in terms of who they sell to, Nexapaper is based in the United States and has no intention of expanding internationally. And they sell final paper products that they assemble to various wholesalers and retailers like Office Depot.
Awesome. Yeah, that's definitely really helpful information. I'm ready to keep going and start addressing this key question that the client has.
Great. Yeah, so the first thing we want to kind of do is a little bit of brainstorming. So first off, can you brainstorm some reasons why Nexapaper profits have been negative?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think when I first think about profits, I would think about it in both the revenue factors, so how they're making money, and then the cost factor and how they're spending money. So I think it would be helpful when we do this brainstorm to kind of break it down into those two key categories. So starting with the revenue side first, I know that revenue is made up of typically price and volume. That could be across different products, but let's just simplify that for now. So some revenue factors that could be contributing to decreased profits would be either a lower price, which demand hasn't compensated for, so that could mean a revenue drop, or there just could be lower demand in general, and maybe that's just because there's new competitors in the paper market that are stealing some of Nexapaper's market share. I think what is even more interesting is on the cost side, and I think that's a lever that we can look at as well. So specifically there, I think I might look into raw materials costs, the cost of labor, and cost of shipping as well. So raw materials could be the wood that's used in the paper, any other kind of chemicals or materials that are used to treat the paper in its production process. Labor could just be workers that are either cutting down the trees all the way to the people driving the trucks that ship paper to Nexapaper's customers. And then in shipping costs, obviously, how much ever if they're using cars or trucks or airplanes to get their paper to their customers around the country, there would be shipping costs there as well.
Absolutely. Those are some really great reasons that you came up with. I'm going to press you for a little bit more here. So I think you mentioned a lot of great factors in the cost side. Let's try to think about what are some other factors which might be affecting profits on the revenue side.
Definitely, yeah. So I think I would return to that volume part of revenue. So like I said, there's new competitors that could be reducing that volume component, but there could also just be, I think, less sort of macro demand for paper in general as people move to using more technology, And also I might think that like there's less businesses coming up these days that are using paper as a part of their everyday operations. And most people are switching to using some sort of technology to keep track of their documents.
Absolutely. Some really great reasons there. Great. I think we're good to move on. So after doing some research, our team's hypothesis is that the cost of raw wood to make wood pulp is increasing, which is ultimately making our paper more expensive overall. So looking at this exhibit that we have here, can you think of some reasons why the cost of raw wood might be increasing?
Yeah, absolutely. So it looks like kind of the main reason we've identified was related to that raw materials cost that we were talking about earlier. So it looks like that hypothesis panned out for us here. But in terms of why the price of raw wood might be increasing, so I think I would, again, kind of think about this in two different components. So I would want to think about the supply of raw wood available and then also the demand. And I think I know that, generally if the demand for the good is increasing, and the price will also generally increase. If the supply is decreasing, then the price is going to increase as well. So I think I would look at it in those two factors holistically. So, maybe to drill down to some more specific reasons outside of just supply and demand, I would start with supply. And I think maybe some factors that could be decreasing that supply, which would be increasing the price, could be just lower output in general from people producing wood. Maybe their processes have gotten less efficient. They're able to produce less. Maybe there's just less people producing wood in the world in general. And that could be for a variety of reasons. Maybe there's like unions or labor shortages or something like that, wherever Nexapaper is sourcing their wood from. So those could be some reasons on the supply side. On the demand side, so we'd be looking at ways in which demand could increase, which would increase the price. We might have just more people producing paper or other wood-related products that could be driving up demand. There could be wood demand across other industries, maybe in like the camping industry, if people use like wood to make firewood, maybe in like the music industry with like violins and cellos. I'm sure there's other industries that use a lot more wood, but those might be some factors that are driving up demand overall, which could increase the price.
Yeah, definitely. I think like again, like really good brainstorming there. Let's go back to that supply bucket again. I think like you mentioned lower output for wood producers, and you mentioned a specific factor could be like labor shortages or strikes. Can you think of any other reasons why the wood cost might be increasing in that particular bucket?
Yeah. Let me just take a second here. So we had said that if the supply is decreasing, then the price is going to increase. And one of the things that we had mentioned was just labor shortages decreasing the supply that's able to be produced. I think another way that this could happen is governments could be increasingly putting regulations on the amount of wood that's allowed to be taken from trees, especially as people are starting to notice that deforestation is a bigger and bigger problem. So that could be another potential reason that's more government or policy driven as opposed to economics.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like in fact our team found that that was actually one of the leading causes of this increasing cost of raw wood. So good job over there. I think we're good to move on. We're kind of going to shift gears a little bit here, move on to a little bit of a market sizing exercise. So we recently upgraded from keeping our data in physical books to data servers. And in the move, we lost some important data. We want you to figure out how many reams of paper Nexapaper sells in a year in the United States, assuming that Nexapaper owns 30% of the overall paper market.
Gotcha. Okay. So we're looking for general market size of paper in the US. And I just want to make sure that I have that figure right. We said Nexapaper has 30% of the market.
Yes, 30% of the market.
Awesome. Yeah, so I think with this market size in particular, there's kind of two main uses of paper that I see very broadly. It would be like personal use of paper, like the paper that I'm using right now to take notes on this case while we're doing it. And then also the business use of paper. So that might be, law firms or hospitals or any other type of company out there that's using paper as a way to keep track of their other documents and things like that. So I think that's the way that I'm going to break it down. So just writing on my paper, let's go personal in one column and then business in another column. And so the way that I want to figure out this market size is look at within personal, how many people are going to be using paper, what's an average usage of reams per year, and then get a personal market size for the paper market. And then when I do the business side, I think I want to segment it a little more maybe into heavy users of paper, medium users of paper, and light users of paper, and kind of figure out the market size in a similar way. So before we jump into that, just one quick question that I had is how many sheets are in a ream of paper?
Yeah, great question. So a ream of paper is 500 sheets.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, I think that's definitely helpful when it comes to putting some numbers to this market size for sure. So specifically starting with the personal use, I'm just going to assume 300 million people in the United States. And I think, I would definitely be on the higher end of paper used in a year. I tend to write a lot of my solutions on paper, which isn't great for the environment, I know, but I'm working on cutting back. But I would say I probably use, maybe even like 1,000 sheets of paper per year, or probably even more than that, just between printing and kind of writing and stuff. So I'm going to bump down that average to maybe 750 sheets of paper, which would then be 1.5 reams. So for personal use, I'm going to say 300 million users, 1.5 reams a year per user, which is going to get me to 450 million reams. So that's the personal side of the equation. I'm going to now jump over to the business side of the equation, which I think is where we're going to get into a lot of bigger numbers, because I think businesses use a lot more papers. So I think the steps to figure this out here are first to understand how many businesses are there in the US. Then I want to segment that into heavy users of paper, medium users of paper, and light users of paper, just like on a percentage basis, and then figure out how many sheets of paper each of those three categories use, and then kind of jump from there straight into some calculations. So I think it roughly makes sense if there's maybe like a 1 to 10 ratio of businesses to people. And I think just a reasonable figure that I'm going to go ahead and use here is 20 million businesses in the US. Does that sound okay with you?
Yeah, sounds totally fine. Let's go with that.
Cool. So I think for the heavy, medium, light segmentation, I would assume very few are heavy, and then kind of the medium and the light might be spread a little more equally. So I'm going to say heavy is 20%, medium is 40%, and light is 40%. So that adds up to 100%. So that makes sense to me.
Mhm.
Starting with the heavy businesses. So we've got 20% of businesses are heavy users of paper. And I'm going to say that these use a lot of reams of paper per year. I'm thinking of like law firms, doctors' offices, things like that. So I'm going to go with 200K to 200,000 reams of paper. So specifically for the heavy users, we've got 20% of businesses are heavy users. There's 20 million businesses in the US. So that would be 4 million businesses are going to be heavy users of paper, and each of those are using 200,000 reams per year. So that is going to get me to 800 billion reams of paper, if I did that math correctly. So to the medium users of paper, we said there's 40% of businesses that are medium users of paper. So that's going to be 8 million businesses. And then for the heavy users, I assume 200,000 reams per year. Here, I'm just going to assume 50. So I've got 8 million businesses, 50,000 reams of paper per year. That's going to get me 400 billion reams of paper. For the light users, again, 40%, so 8 million businesses. And then I'm going to do, let's say, 10,000 reams per year here, just to get it underneath the medium. And that kind of seems like a reasonable figure for me to use here. So that's going to get me to 80 billion reams of paper used by the light business users. So just adding up all the business side of the equation. So we had 800 billion in the heavy users, 400 billion in the medium users, and 80 billion in the light users. So total, if I just add that up, that looks like it's going to be 1.28 trillion reams on the business side. And then we also had the personal side, which now looks very insignificant since that's in millions and the business side is in billions. So I'm just going to round that to 1.3 trillion. So that 1.3 trillion is the total market size that we identified for paper in the United States. Definitely seems like a sizable market to me. But the key question we were trying to answer is, what is Nexapaper's share in that? And if I remember correctly, we said that was 30%. So if the total market size is 1.3 trillion and Nexapaper has a 30% share, so I'm just going to do 3/10 of 1.3 trillion. So that's going to be about 0.39 trillion, which I'm just going to round up to 0.4. So 0.4 trillion is going to be 400 billion reams. So I think that's what the Nexa paper share of the market is going to be based on the personal business segmentation and then that 30% figure that you gave to me, which seems like definitely that they're a significant player in the industry. I don't know how segmented it is, but 30% I think seems like a high figure. So definitely think that macro cost of the raw wood pulp price increasing is sort of affecting all players in the space, maybe squeezing that profitability a bit.
Yeah, definitely. I think like we came to a similar result as well. So I think that 400 billion reams of paper is a very large amount, as you said. So yeah, I think we're good to get going to the next main question here. So now we know that increased regulation on deforestation is really what's causing the price of wood pulp to rise, as you kind of pointed out, and this is leading to higher costs to make our paper. Again, we also know how much paper Nexa paper sells yearly from the previous question. So due to the increased regulation on deforestation, Nexa paper is considering to switch to cotton to make paper. We have this exhibit here. We want you to figure out how much paper Nexa paper has to sell to break even if we make the switch to cotton-based paper. So take some time to go ahead and look at this exhibit. Maybe tell me kind of what you see, and then also let's go ahead and figure out how much paper Nexa paper has to sell to break even.
Definitely. Yeah, I'm just going to take 20 seconds here, make sure I read through this and then come back to you.
Great.
Great. Yep. So I think what I'm seeing here is obviously we've got the price. So that's kind of the revenue figure that we're looking at multiplied by whatever volume we want to sell, which is kind of what we're looking for. That's the break even amount, I would say. And then in the next 3 rows, we've got some variable costs per ream. So, and this is specifically related to cotton. And then on the bottom, it looks like we've got some fixed costs, specifically for the machines in which they need to use the cotton. And am I correct in assuming that 3 in parentheses after cotton assembly machines means they need 3 of those in order to fully make the switch to cotton?
Yes, they need 3 machines. Each machine costs $174 million.
Okay, gotcha. And so the quantity that we're looking for is how much paper they need to sell in order to break even, which, if I'm correct, break even means 0 profit.
Yes, 0 profit. And how many reams of paper do they want to sell?
Gotcha. Okay, cool. Well, so I know that profit is equal to revenues minus costs. So if I want 0 profits, that means that revenues are going to have to equal costs. And then I also know that costs are equal to fixed costs plus variable costs. So I think that's sort of the math way in which I'm going to go about it and try and get to a number which makes that profit equation 0. So let's go ahead and dive into that approach. So first, I'm going to start with the fixed costs. So if the fixed cost of each machine is 174 million and they need 3 machines, that would be 174 times 3, which is going to be 522. So it looks like the fixed costs are 522 million. And then I think the way that we can do this is figure out the profit per ream and see how many reams we need to sell in order to completely cover all of those fixed costs. So basically what that means is we have this set of fixed costs since we've already bought these 3 machines, and that's 522 million. And then on each ream of paper we sell, we're going to make some profit. And we want to sell just enough so that the profit that we get from selling the reams equals that 522 million of fixed costs. So let's figure out the profit per ream first. So if I look at this data, I see that the revenue is going to be $12 per ream. And then all of the costs put together, so that's 0.25 plus 2.35 plus 1.6. That means it's going to be $4.20 of cost per ream. So if the revenue is $12 and the costs are $4.20, then that means that the profit per ream is going to be $7.80. So that means that I want to do 522 million divided by 7.8, and that's going to be the break-even amount. That's going to be how many reams of paper that I need to sell. So that 7.8 figure is just a little worrying to me. I don't think I want to get into that detail of decimal math. So what I'm going to do instead is just do 520 divided by 8, since I think it's going to make the math a little easier for me. So 520 divided by 8, I know 8 goes into 52, I want to say 6 times, because 8 times 6 is 48. Yep. And then the remainder is 40. So that means that the last digit in that number is 65. So it looks like based on that math, the break-even amount of reams of paper they need to sell is going to be around 65 million reams of paper.
Great. Yeah, that sounds good with me. Nice job on rounding the values there to make it a little bit easier. And yeah, that sounds good. So let's kind of put that number into context here. So what does that kind of mean here? That 65 million reams of paper.
Definitely, yeah. So the kind of key business question that we were trying to address is, so first of all, the wood pulp was squeezing profitability, so we want to make this switch to cotton, and then we wanted to understand, given how much they sell, is this break-even quantity too low or too high to make the switch to cotton? So based on these numbers, it does seem as though we are currently selling 500 billion reams of paper, and we only need to sell 67 million to break even, which is a very small percentage compared to the total volume. So based on that, I think it makes sense to make the switch to cotton, which would then, kind of reduce the cost that we're experiencing and create a bump in profitability again.
Cool. Yeah, that definitely makes sense to me as well. Kind of like understanding that we're definitely selling a lot before, and looks like we don't need to sell relatively as much to break even as you mentioned. So I'm just going to push back a little bit on this though. So can you think of a little bit of maybe some risks that might be associated with making the switch to going towards cotton paper?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a good point. So I'm not super familiar with the differences between wood-based paper and cotton-based paper, but maybe the assembly of the cotton paper might be more difficult, or also maybe the consumer preference is for wood paper, and there's going to be less demand for the cotton paper, which means that market sizing figure from earlier might just not be relevant. But I do think that within both of those risks, there are mitigation strategies we can pursue. So if the assembly turns out to be more difficult, I think we can look at, industry standards for cotton-based paper, maybe hiring some more experienced labor initially in order to make sure that processes are as efficient as possible. And then on the customer preference side, so figuring out whether or not customers want to buy cotton paper, we could conduct a survey to see what their preferences are. And if it turns out that they are more fans, they're fans of wood paper more than cotton, then maybe we could use some environmentally friendly marketing in order to help consumers understand why cotton is better for them in the long run.
Definitely. Yeah, that's a really great identification of risk there, and then also some mitigation strategies as well. So that wraps up the case. So as you can see, it's relatively short, and a lot of the questions are pretty open-ended. So really leaving room for the interviewee to showcase their creativity and brainstorming skills. I think Shankar did a really great job on this. I think definitely showed a lot of effective answers and a lot of the things that we might be looking for in a potential Nexecon first round. So let's walk through each question really quickly and just talk quickly about how Shankar's answers were effective and kind of hopefully that will help you in your preparation process. So first off, let's just start with the prompt. So when I read the prompt, a key thing is that Shankar asked clarifying questions. Really don't be afraid to do this, especially if you're not familiar with the industry. Specifically for this, not many people are that familiar with paper industry specifically. And he also repeated the problem just to make sure he understood it right. So we're always starting off on the right foot. Because if you ask those questions, then the interviewer can potentially correct any misconceptions that you might have had or anything you might have misheard. So on the first question, which was the brainstorming question, the first thing Shankar did was that he took a step back and figured out that profits were made up of revenues minus cost. And using those buckets that he came up with, the revenues and costs, he was able to segment his recommendations and provide a really structured approach. And that's one of the key things that we're looking for in cases is that structured approach. How are you able to approach these problems and divide them up and come up with strategies in different buckets potentially? And moving on here, I think in the second question as well, right? With the looking at why the cost of wood might be increasing, again, Shankar segmented into two things. He said, okay, the supply of paper could be going down or the demand, the supply of the wood could be going down or the demand of the wood could be going up as well. So again, identifying those key driving factors allows you to kind of get more specific beneath those buckets later on. Moving on to that market sizing and the quantitative portion of the case interview, Shankar did a really good job with the math. First of all, I think that's one important thing that we look for. But maybe more importantly is that he talked through his process the entire time. That's one of the key things that we look for in interviews is we want candidates to be able to talk through their thinking process so the interviewer could follow exactly what they're thinking about and where they're going. And additionally, with both of the answers, he put his answer into context. What does the number that you get to mean, and does it make sense? So specifically for the market sizing, he noted that the 400 billion reams of paper that are sold each year by Nexapaper seems to be a pretty large amount, and it looks like they're definitely a sizable player in the paper market. And finally, going to the recommendation, Shankar provided a clear and concise recommendations based on that previous calculation. And then also he was pushed to consider some possible risks. He was able to identify important risks and then also possible mitigation strategies for those risks as well. That's one of the important things that we would like to see as well. When you're providing a recommendation, always make sure to consider that there might be alternative options or there might be something that goes wrong with it. How do we fix that? The most important thing to pick up from Shankar's answers is that he really talked through his thought process each time and is allowing the interviewer to see how he approached those various problems.
Definitely. And thanks for the feedback, Ravi. I'm sure that's helpful for people watching. I would also just keep in mind that, you know, the case doesn't need to be perfect when you do it, and that your interviewers are there to work with you as a team in order to solve the business problem at hand. And they really just want to understand how you think and how you're approaching the problem. So just go into that, go into the interview with that mentality. And I think things will go as well as they can. So like Ravi said, hopefully this gives you a better understanding of what a first round might look like. If you have any questions about the application process or interviews or anything about Nexecon, please reach out to eBoard or feel free to go on the website. But with that, I think we'll wrap up the video and thanks for watching and we hope to see you at some of our events this semester.